Coming up, yet another wonderful conversation with one of our industry's great bank CEOs. We're very fortunate to be able to welcome David Findlay from a great bank in the Midwest, so Lake City, joining us on the podcast today. I'm Al Dominic, one of your hosts with Steve Williams.
Hello, Al. Hello, David. Good to have you today.
Good afternoon, guys.
You know, we've had some really interesting conversations of late with Nitin Matre from Berkshire, Jeff Jackson from West Banco. Before that, Mike Daniels from Nicolay. Each brings a different perspective on what's happening in the banking space. And we just thought what David has built and the team that he leads is so compelling and so interesting that we wanted to take a few minutes to get his take on a few things that are happening in the industry right now. So I fortunately had a chance to fly to Scottsdale last night from Nashville, Tennessee. On the flight, I listened to some music that inspired some of our conversation. And David, if you've listened to Plugged In, you know that we really have a fondness for bringing certain musicians and tracks into the conversation just to keep things light and simple. So, you know, being that you're out in Indiana and me being from Boston and being a Larry Bird fan, it would have been natural to say Indiana's got a new state bird as one of our songs for Larry Legend. But, you know, I couldn't find that oldie but goodie. So I had to find some others that are a little bit more contemporary on the Spotify playlist. So we're going to use the Eagles, Life in the Fast Lane. We're going to talk The Killers and Mr. Brightside. Billy Joel's Only the Good Die Young. John Mellencamp's Small Town. And then to take us home, we're not taking any diss tracks out, but we are going to use Kendrick Lamar's and All the Stars to get this special issue of Plugged In going in the right direction.
Well, it's Indiana. You got to get Mellencamp in. So good job.
Thank you, Steve.
Right.
All right, Dave, I hope you're ready because, again, we're going to do some fun stuff. And, you know, we wanted to start this whole thing off by sharing some really interesting statistics about you and the organization. And I think Steve jotted a few down to keep us honest.
Yeah, I love rattling off these things, David. You know, $5 billion bank. Everybody's out there punditing that it's all about scale. So Dave's been there about 24 years. And when you came in, and at the time that David joined the bank 24 years ago, book value per share, $4. Today, about $32. This is a bank, Al, that consistently grows book value per share 10% a year.
Yep.
Through everything we've seen, through COVID, the Great Resignation, a historic Fed tightening that took some banks out. So during all this time in the last 5 years, KBW Regional Bank Stock Index up about 2%. Now get this, Lake City Bank shares up 43%. So, you know, people
that puts a smile on Dave's face.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Absolutely. So, Al, it begs a question, doesn't it?
It
What do you
really
think
does.
the question is?
Well, look, we have our secret sauce, but we'll even brought our secret sauce
Yes,
with us.
Secret sauce. What we want to know from Findlay
We want to know what is your secret sauce to
what
get this
is the
thing?
secret sauce? 10% a year in a really tough industry through good times and bad. David, there's got to be a secret sauce you can share with other bankers.
Actually, the only secret sauce I have is Don's rib sauce at Alcona Country Club in Elkhart, Indiana, which he gives me on the side when he makes ribs on Thursday nights. You know, Mike Kabaki, my predecessor, and I, 24 years ago, we looked and said, we want to be a high-performing bank. And we tried to break down banks that we had a lot of respect for and banks that we believe did things the right way. And did things the right way, not only in the context of taking care of employees and customers and communities, but ultimately taking care of shareholders. And that shareholder component, you can argue, is driven by the book value per share. And as we broke that down and developed a plan to try to go from what quite honestly was not a high performing bank in 2000 into one that we are pleased to say has been one, is the simple blocking and tackling. There is no secret sauce to making the right decisions day in and day out and running the bank. We are a shareholder-centric organization, but if you walk around the 54 offices of Lake City Bank or through any of our facilities in Warsaw, Indiana, and say, what matters to this bank? People probably won't say book value per share or stock price or shareholder value creation, but they'll have a component of it that contributes to that ultimate valuation of both the bank stock and the book value per share. So there is no secret sauce. It's just a disciplined approach to executing day in and day out on what we do here and understanding that we're a blocking and tackling organization.
Yeah, every investor, every analyst I've ever talked to about your bank, David, is the consistency. There are going to be no crazy surprises. That fundamentals, very much stressed by everybody who views this as an investment.
Well, and again, I love Steve bringing some context to the conversation with those data points, because telling a story and telling a consistent growth story is really hard. But when you're able to say, hey, it's about being prudent, disciplined, and repeatable, as investors, as folks in the community, they start to prize that when they see year after year, it's not just words. So I think that's really cool. And I appreciate you sharing that. Now, our secret sauce looks like a little agave. Maybe it's some maple syrup. I don't know. But, it works. Everyone has different ways of approaching things.
It was a last minute prop. We stuck some paper that said secret sauce on a bottle of honey from the fridge.
We're super entrepreneurial at Cornerstone.
Yeah, we go with the flow.
But, again, we're telling stories. So if we're telling a story about how our secret sauce came out, I was looking at some of your recent investor presentations. And again, to build on what Steve shared, you're able to show some real significant organic deposit growth over the past decade. I know there's other banks that talk about this, but really you've got the Chases and the PNCs of the world that are knocking at your door and you're competing against. How do you plan to maintain Lake City Bank's competitive advantage while facing that type of competition, and also that from the various tech companies that are not so friendly to the banking sector?
Yeah, quite honestly, I'm not sure we've done an exceptional job at deposit gathering. We tend to have a higher cost of deposits than peer and competition, but it's not because we're overpaying for deposits. It's because the historical composition of our deposit base has essentially a distribution between retail, commercial, and public fund entities. And we all know that the public fund entities tend to be more expensive deposits. But for us, we've worked very aggressively to convert those hot deposits from public fund entities and make them clients through operating relationships where we are the city, the county, the school systems bank. That makes it much more sticky money to us. So that's part of the reason we've been able to have healthy deposit growth, because we've taken what has historically been expensive hot money and made it more stable deposits, albeit at a slightly higher rate, that help us fund the higher than average loan growth that we tend to have. Another thing that we've done really over the last 2 decades is to look at our non-borrowing commercial client base. And if you go back 20 years, nobody owned the idea of finding that commercial company down the block that wasn't a borrower but was a net depositor. Our retail banking team didn't pursue those, and our commercial banking team certainly didn't either, because they weren't borrowers. And what we've been able to do, primarily through retail, but in conjunction with commercial, is to say, we've got to find those non-borrowing customers and get their deposits and make them customers. And we do that through a competitive treasury management platform that we can walk in and say, whatever big bank you're doing business with today, we have a technology platform through Lake City Bank Digital or Lake City Bank Online that will replace what you've got with the big bank and will be more local and more relationship driven and therefore be a better bank for you. Yeah. But back to your secret sauce analogy, there is no secret sauce to this. It is beating the pavement to find those customers who are net deposit contributors and bringing them into the bank and keeping them in the bank.
Yeah, I've seen statistics, David, that half of small businesses don't borrow, or if they do, it's from a family member, so they're not using bank credit. And in that group, the vast majority are still with the big banks. So I think you're onto something about, we just haven't been aligned organizationally to go after the non-borrowing small business. What an opportunity when funding is a systemic issue for the rest of the decade.
Yeah. And again, bringing it back to the fun music that I referenced, this is life in the fast lane, isn't it? I mean, this is where the Eagles would have been getting people excited back in the day. But, it's getting out on the street. It's seeing the people that you care about and making sure that the relationship is, again, not just a transaction, but it's something that's durable and it's consistent year over year. One of the other songs I mentioned was Billy Joel's "Only the Good Die Young." And, having seen the Piano Man in person, I was impressed with how he gets people just excited, and participating. I think you and the bank have done a really exceptional job of holding on to your commercial deposits in a pretty tough environment. But on the flip side, it seems from the outside that your retail deposit retention has been tougher. And again, this is an outsider looking in, so correct me if I'm wrong. But, with your business model, our rough math was looking at maybe 100 retail checking accounts per month were being added. So Steve and I have long talked about what makes for a strong retail franchise within a commercial organization. And I think it's an interesting opportunity to ask you if A, our math and observations are correct, and B, like, how do you see protecting and really growing that retail funding inside of your commercial business?
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great question. I think the song I would pick up and say is appropriate to this is Bruce Springsteen's "Born to Run," because we have created an organization that just knows how to chase the business we need to smartly grow the balance sheet. And again, a shift over the last 24 years that's happened here is we've taken our retail banking team, who were historically 2000 and before, just taken advantage or expected to deliver deposit growth to fund loan growth. We've always said we make loans in $1 million increments and deposits in $1,000 increments. And you got to have a lot of $1,000 increment loans to fund deposits to fund $1 million loan. And we've been very conscientious to think about the role of retail banking and communicating that role of retail banking internally. They were second-class citizens to some degree at the bank because they were just expected to find that next deposit to fund their portion of that next loan. And we've really raised and elevated the role of retail banker here versus what it had been historically. And as we all, and Steve does this for a living, as you look at what the role of a branch is and what the role of technology is in our banking, clearly branches have to be more than just transaction centers. They have to evolve into problem solution centers and business growth centers. We tell our retail managers, be in the office when you need to be, but more importantly, get out of your office and go call on customers and go be active and find the next deposit portfolio that's going to help us fund the loan that we're going to make. So it's a very driven effort to give retail bankers a prioritization inside the bank for their efforts in deposit gathering.
Yeah. And I think one of the lessons I see out there is there aren't the barriers to entry that people would think. Like, we can't give a digital experience. We can't do digital and social marketing. We can't be active in the community. I think that to Nitin Montreux's point, there are no barriers to entry with some of this marketing technology, digital technology. It just hasn't had that emphasis within most commercial banks like you talk about, Dave.
Well, let me put David on the spot, because right before we push record, you were telling us a really wonderful story about one of your colleagues who's doing something unexpected in the community. And I think, this ties into, there are very small barriers to entry, and really it's your creativity, right, that you just got to be comfortable with and say, I'm going to do something, and what if it works? So David, do you mind us putting you on the spot with this what if this works concept?
No, I think the story I was sharing is about one of our community outreach officers in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and his role in helping serve the Black community of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I was we were on a calling blitz, as we call it, and we were out knocking on doors and introducing the bank to people that likely were not clients of the bank or may not even have ever heard of the bank in the neighborhoods we were calling in. And we walked into a retail shop, and the owner immediately started talking to my two colleagues about his relationships with them and his knowledge of them. And I thought, how in the world does this guy who I've never met know anything about Lake City Bank or JJ or Renita? And the answer was JJ, as part of his community outreach, does a podcast in this gentleman's business once a week, directed at financial intelligence and financial planning and intelligent, smart financial activities for the Black community in Fort Wayne. And I didn't know about it. And I didn't know about it because JJ said, it's just what I do. It's what you guys want me to do. And here he was creating a value for the community that I didn't know about, but this not client of the bank, but this important man in that community recognized Lake City Bank's contributions. That's the boots on the ground mindset. Nobody here told JJ to go do that. He went and did it. He created that relationship. He does this weekly podcast, and he's committed to it and embraces it. And it's just very cool.
And very authentic. I mean, if it came for the top, it might have come across like a bad dad joke, but it was very authentic and boots on the ground. So that with that kind of organic creativity you mentioned, Al, we see that out there, but it's kind of bright spots now. If you multiplied that that's where I think the regional mid-sized banks can really shine with their mission of being community focused.
Yeah. And look, we like bad dad jokes like everyone else. So let's not get sideways on that. But, what I think is nice about David's example is, here's somebody who's putting somebody else's success ahead of his own.
Right.
And I also appreciate how David was sharing the story with us, because it was one of pride and admiration that somebody you work with did this. And it wasn't, what's it going to confer to the business? It was more, we're doing something for our community that's going to strengthen the long-term success of individuals who are part of the state. Right. And I think this is where regional and community banks do such an incredible job. I'd love to be able to tell more of their stories, because they sometimes get lost in the shuffle. Right. And the whole idea that there's big banks that are just doing all this, quote, great stuff ignores the fact that there's banks of $6.5 billion that are doing some really wonderful things as well.
Right. So, Al, let me interrupt you and add one more thing to that. About 7 years ago, I was in Indianapolis calling with one of our retail branch managers on the near west side of Indianapolis, which is primarily a Black community. And we had this wonderful meeting with a community service organization on the near west side of Indianapolis. And we walked out of that meeting, and we were standing in the parking lot. And I said to the retail bank manager, "What would you think about being our community outreach officer in Indianapolis?" And she said, "Is that a job?" And I said, "No, but we can make it one." And the next day, we agreed to create that role and put her in it. And she celebrates her 10th anniversary at Lake City Bank this week. And she constantly tells me this is the ideal job for her, and we created it for her because of her.
That's cool.
In today's world, they call those brand ambassadors, on the social media side, but it is a position that we would see it multiplying in the industry. Very cool story, David.
All right. So you like John Mellencamp. When I brought him up, you said you've got to have John Mellencamp before having this type of conversation. So if we're saying small town, how does that tie into a bank of this size with 53 branches across the state? Can you give me an idea of why I think that song is appropriate?
I was born. Yeah, I love the drum. The drum
if
start.
You want, because we won't get censored for that.
Gonna die in a small town.
I was born and raised in a small town.
One of those. Okay, but 6.4 billion, 53 branches. Our question is, what's the next move on the footprint? There's been a lot of consolidation. Yeah. People like to see regional consolidation, but you've kind of stuck to the state. What should we expect from Lake City, David?
So we opened our 54th office a few weeks ago. So we're at 54 now. And this year we've grown to about 6.7 billion. And bringing up Mellencamp's I was born in a small town. We love our small towns. We have a branch in Madairyville, Indiana, that has not grown nor has it shrunk for the last decade to any great degree. We are that community's bank. It is a very small community, but it's one that we're the community's bank, and we're the neighboring rural towns bank. And it's another difference, Al, you would say a difference between us and big banks. Most big banks would have looked at that and said, why in the world do we have that branch there? It's not producing the revenue growth or the EPS contribution it needs to. So let's shut it down, and we'll tell them to drive 15 miles to the next nearest branch. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep those rural branches open and keep them active deposit gatherers, even if it's deposit maintainers. But then you say, well, where are we going to go for the next growth? And we opened that 54th office in the Indianapolis market in Carmel, Indiana, several weeks ago. It's hit the ground running, and it's hit the ground running because of our reputation in Indianapolis. It's been created over the last 13 years that we've been in that market. We didn't open 5 branches in one day or 10 branches in 5 years. We've opened 8 branches in 13 years. And those branches have one by one built the reputation of the bank in the community so that we get to the point that we open in Carmel and it hits the ground running, and it has quick growth in home equity applications, deposit gathering, commercial opportunities. And it's just built the building blocks of getting there. We've been in Elkhart, Indiana since 1990. We have a 23% deposit market share in that market, number 2 in the market behind one of the big banks. In Warsaw, Indiana, a small town where we're headquartered, in Kosciuszko County, we have a 66% market share in this county. And so all we do is we look at where we are, what the growth potential is, and we just keep trying to, day by day, week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter, grow the deposit base, or in some of those more mature towns, retain it. But we never lose the idea that we're going to deliver these products and services like a real community bank, but with the technology and sophistication we need.
Right.
So we don't have the next market. We don't think we need the next market because the bad news is in Indianapolis we're 1% of deposit market share. The good news is we're 1% of deposit market share. There's a lot to go.
Yeah,
and so it goes back to that execution and planning and just pounding the pavement.
Yeah, and so, it's also a wonderful reminder that quality never goes out of style.
Right. But there's also a dichotomy here. There's, I was born in a small town, but I think our last question ties to the fact, Al, that Lake City Bank just opened a new building, an innovation and tech center. This is not Microsoft. This is not NVIDIA. No, it's Lake City Bank. So let's hear.
Well, part of the reason I wanted to bring Kendrick Lamar into the conversation is not because he's going to be the Super Bowl halftime act. Not to have the diss track that he was putting out against Drake and, kind of just eviscerated him. But, for Black Panther, he had the song All the Stars.
Okay.
That was
Great movie.
Super, super popular. Mm-hmm. And it was just one of those reminders that there's that moment where the light goes on and everyone just gets excited. And it strikes me that this recent acquisition of the building that Steve just mentioned, which is specific to technological advancements for the bank, but it's for the community that you serve. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a really incredible story. So I just want to, better understand, your thoughts for making that investment, because that's playing the long game, again, in a state where, growth is not as explosive as in other parts of the country.
We're really proud of the roots we have in Warsaw, Indiana. It's a community of 14,000 people in a county, a Kosciuszko County of about 80,000. You don't find many $6.7 billion banks headquartered in places like this. The Innovation and Technology Center that you're talking about brings to 6 the buildings we have in our downtown Warsaw campus. With nearly 300 employees in downtown Warsaw, we're by far the largest employer in a town that is the orthopedic capital of the world. Zimmer Biomet is outside my window. Depew Synthes is down the road. We've got major orthopedic companies, but nobody in downtown Warsaw has more people than we do here. And we take that commitment to this community very seriously. We want to be a part of Warsaw's future. And so the Innovation and Technology Center is really, honestly, more of a reflection of the fact that we once again have run out of space in Warsaw, and we need to have additional growth capacity here as we continue down the path. Its naming of the Innovation and Technology Center is really driven by the mission we've been on for a long time, and that's to be a technology leading community bank service provider. Mm-hmm. We know that we cannot compete with our large bank brethren without the technology platform that is competitive or even better than theirs. And I would tell you, as much as I like the name of the building, I think more importantly, it's a part of the mission of what we do inside the company. I want people to walk into that building every day and say, innovation, technology. That's I'm staring at the building as I look out the window here. So I look up and I see it. And I see where the sign's going to say Innovation and Technology Center. As a matter of fact, here's the sign right there. And and that's the mindset we want people at the bank to have. So it's where our technology people will be, our product and project management, our application management. But what it really is just part of the mindset of never getting comfortable with what we've got from a technology and innovation perspective, and always looking for that next thing, because the last time a community bank was flat-footed, they probably didn't last. So we have to have that innovation mindset as we go forward.
Very cool.
Well, it's a really wonderful story that you've been able to share with us. And again, I mentioned some of the other CEOs we've talked to. One of the things that's been really impressive is to hear the commitment to technology as an accelerator for the business that you've already built, and for really helping your teams to perform at an even higher level. Yeah. It's not to replace, it's not to supplement or substitute something because you're not doing a job well. It's to say there are tools available that can maybe boost productivity, but also improve efficiency at the same time. So
what a signal we've said about attracting younger generations, that they see a building called the Tech and Innovation Center, not your grandpa's bank necessarily. 100%. So you got the traditions. When I think about this great story, we missed a song. We're going so fast. The Killers.
We did.
Mr. Brightside.
Well, that's a good wedding song. Everyone gets out on the dance floor for that one. So it's probably a good way for us.
University of Michigan kids having that song. But maybe the quote to kind of wrap it up is, coming out of the cold and I'm doing just fine. There's been a lot going on in banking. But I think Lake City Bank is another one of those bright lights of entrepreneurs in the community, boots on the ground. But it's about as easy as a golf swing, David, to turn out 10% book value per share growth for 24 years. So we just want to say bravo, well done.
Well done, and we appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone who's been listening in. He's Steve Williams. I'm Al Dominic. We appreciate David Findlay for getting plugged in with Cornerstone Advisors today.